r/Askreddit by Robotainment. Albert Einstein once said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. What was your moment when someone judged you like that? I lived in Argentina for a little bit as a kid at a parent-teacher conference early in the school year. One art teacher had to break it to my parents that I might be mentally disabled because I don't respond or participate. They let her know I didn't speak any Spanish at the time. She had no idea because none told her, and my name is Spanish and it just didn't occur to her. Teacher, I think your child might be mentally challenged. Parent, no, has just American. Currently 8 am. I'm in France for a few months. I can barely speak French and my teachers think I'm mentally challenged, even though I was acing my classes back home. Once someone on Reddit started complaining about something and said I wasn't a real man for a bunch of reasons. I'm a woman, so they're not exactly wrong. I get that all the time too. My personal favorite was when I said it's difficult to date lesbians. It's a common issue with women that they were taught men should make the first move. So with two girls no one wants to move first. Everyone assumed I was a dude harassing lesbians and trying to make them straight, which is why they wouldn't go out with me. Made the comment before going to work and I had -200 by lunch. The time my middle school art teacher called my parents because she thought I was purposefully mocking her by making my art bad. I literally can't draw beyond a 3rd grade level unless I'm copying an object right in front me. My parents basically cussed her out after they saw how hurt I was. Has she really experienced such vindictive kids? When I was in the Navy I used to get in fairly frequent trouble for the suggestions I made for improving operational efficiencies. As an outside contractor they were quite happy to pay me $200 an hour to say the exact same thing. Personal change must come from within. Organizational change must come from without. In school I was too nerdy for the jocks and too jockish for the nerds. Now that we have all grown up I take everyone's money in fantasy football. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Smart moves, my friend. When I said Albert Einstein once said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree it will live its whole life thinking it's stupid, and they said he never said that. Edit, yeah I'm that guy. Big whoop, wanna fight about it. Thanks for my first ever gold kind stranger. Yes, it's a quote by Vladimir Lenin and it actually says, if you judge proletariat by its ability to amass property and capital, the proletariat will always end up admiring the extraordinary talent of the capitalists, rather than realizing it is being oppressed. Playing sports growing up I would make these comically bad errors. The ball would hit me directly in the face or I would swing at a pitch while I too late. Everyone gave me shit, even the coaches and parents. I kept playing because I enjoyed being active and around my friends, but I never understood why. No matter how much I practiced I struggled with basic things that everyone else could do without thinking. I go to the eye doctor as an adult and he tells me that I have a condition in one of my eyes. That means I don't have binocular vision and as a result have very poor depth perception. It's physically impossible for me to track a moving object in space like everyone else. I know the pain. Mate was forced to play volleyball in high school even though I obviously couldn't follow the ball. I was once looking right at it but couldn't spot it and it hit me right in the face. Turns out I have a retinitis pigmentosa, which not only means I can't follow objects but I can't see at night. My peripheral vision sucks and anything that requires precision movement is out of the question. Thankfully I'm great in other fields that do not require good eye coordination. When I was at a company, had me interview for a different position than I had applied for. The position they interviewed me for was one I knew nothing about and told them as much despite me telling them before each round of interviews that they had made a mistake. I still had to endure a full day of people asking me questions that I had no answer to. Oof, sounds like you dodged a bullet though. If ours was that incompetent, they had someone in mind, but needed to interview someone objectively worse than their preferred person so it didn't look like favoritism. I was the fish trying and failing to climb the tree, and my boss called to offer me a position swimming. That time my boss called me to tell me I sucked at my job, but followed it up by telling me I got crazy good comments about this one small part of my job, so would I like to do that full time? did the new thing for 6 years, and used it to land another even better position at the same company. Thanks for recognizing my talents, old boss. You were a bit of a shit boss, but when it mattered you really were a help. Edit. Since so many are asking, here's actual detail. Moved from software implementation, which had a bit of a teaching component to it, to formally teaching how to use the software. Have since moved into writing the content that is taught. 90% of what Albert Einstein quotes on the internet was not said by Albert Einstein. Internet 2019. Albert Einstein once said 90% of my quotes on the internet were not said by me. ASMC judges you on your ability to run, no matter how good or bad you are at anything. If you can run fast, you are presumed better at everything. It overcomes crimes, mental retardation, and absolute stupidity. That's how the army is. When I first came in, my push-ups and sit-ups sucked ass and I borderline failed my part tests. But when my drill sergeants and chain of command saw my 12-10 2-mile run time, Dad has trained me to be a distance runner since I was a little kid. They all left me alone, and once I started putting on muscle in addition to the run time, I was able to get away with so much shit and get out of so many details. Yeah, that's dumb. I don't see how that correlates with your ability to eat crayons. That's cause if you're a marine, you have a lot of retreating and escaping to do, getting out of the way of army or navy shelling. This was kind of judging as well as being judged. In my high school guitar class, me and one other girl were both really struggling. I judged her as being bad at music / unskilled / stupid, like me. Thing is, I remember an incident of my teacher, who was very technologically improficient, asking my help with typing something he'd written by hand. He was trying to read it aloud to me, but eventually I just asked him to set it down where I could see it, because it was easier and faster for me to touch type it. He was floored by how fast and how well / correctly I could type that way, and while many, if not most, 16-year-olds probably can now, back then it was a little less usual. Not too long after, like a week I think, the piano in the music room was, for once, left uncovered. That girl who had judged as being a fellow musical idiot sat down and started playing that piano phenomenally. I have a very visceral and vindicating memory of my guitar teacher looking between her, me, the computer, and my hands, and saying, "You know, that actually explains a lot, TL. Doctor." I judged myself and a guitar classmate as unskilled idiots, discounting just how great our typing / typing and piano skills were. So apparently my ATWPM typing speed might not have become as widespread and normalized as I thought, till, due to the shift of computing from desktop and laptop computers towards mobile phones, we're actually seeing a reversal of the trend that young people can type well. This was basically my childhood. Because I was bad at math, I guess most children goes through this, which is very sad. Only at uni did I realize that I didn't have to be good at everything. I had a professor who spoke 13 languages, but couldn't count how much 5 + 4 is. Has the best at his field. Ironically, once you get to college, all the math professors have forgotten how to do simple math as well. I remember all of us checking like super basic math they are doing on the whiteboard. Course feed fuck it up 1 times in 4, but we're completing these insane proofs. I was always told how bad sleeping in class was despite acing my classes, and teachers would complain to my parents about how much I slept. I felt so horrible for so long, and slept early almost every day to no avail. Turns out I have narcolepsy. So, were you macro napping, or out for the whole lesson? Hope you are now supported in managing this. I'm 66, and I suck at basketball. Should have been 67. Better luck next life. In kindergarten we were learning penmanship and my teacher was telling us how to write our alphabet, but for some reason I could not write the letters, no matter how hard I tried, since I was able to write the alphabet before I got very frustrated and starting crying. Turns out she was showing the class how to do letters with your right hand, and I was left-handed. Had similar experience when trying to learn how to tie my shoelaces. Every adult who tried to help me eventually gave up, and I felt so stupid. Then one day my left-handed uncle left-handed me how to do it, and I learned it immediately. I was a ballerina and I always had a hard time picking up choreography. Other dancers could watch a dance once and know it, Some could even do it from a video I needed to be shown a combination a few times and to go over it a few more, and even then I would forget it the next day. I felt really stupid. Anyway, ballet didn't really work out, and now I have a PhD, so I'm not a complete idiot. I had a similar experience, picked up ballet after my undergrad, and I was terrible, but enjoyed it. Bumped myself up into a higher standard class, where everyone could just effortless recall routines from one viewing, and I just couldn't really hurt my self-esteem, and the girls in the class were very isolating to me. The sole guy there, which sucked, took up rock climbing after, and love it. It didn't align. That I may have slight working memory problems though. I was chased a lot in middle school / early high school for loving hockey, would constantly get my knowledge tested, my appearance would get brought into it. Why would a fat girl like hockey? Had someone ask me if it was my passion and laugh in my face when I said yes. Jokes on them. I'm an officially credentialed journalist by the NHL now and have personally spoken to more players than they could dream of buying autographs from. Now you can tell your former critics to go to HE hockey sticks. I'm very dyslexic. It results in me having the spelling and grammar of a middle schooler. Plus it makes me have trouble hearing similar sounding words. Letters and phonic sounds don't always connect to the idea they represent in my head. I read / listened to the overall idea and not the individual letters. As a result, school was a very mixed bag. I had to be very hardworking to compensate for the disability. I became very good at working with people. I learned to plan ahead because I can't do things last minute, and developed a strong logic skill set. The problem is that many teachers thought I was lazy because I would describe what I thought while the other person wrote it down, etc. In college, the department head of chemistry is the teacher that fully understand who I'm as an academic student. He thought it was hilarious that I had the highest lab grade, while the low end of the class portion. Apparently it caused heated discussions as why the only non-premed was doing so much better than the premed students in laboratory classes. I think he was the only teacher that appreciated that I was good at working with people and terrible at writing papers for classes. I mostly judged myself. My whole life I pressured myself to be just as smart as my dad and brother, who were phenomenal in math and engineering. My dad has an IQ of 138 and my brother always had As and made the dean's list in post-secondary. The institution gave out entire cakes to those on the dean's list. I struggled so hard in math. I tried so hard, exponentially more than any other kid, because I felt like if I didn't get good at math, or any subject for that matter, then I wasn't smart. Always a C+B student, because I wasn't good at something. I very much lived years feeling I was stupid. Then as I grew older I realized that my skills in art were actually worth something. My art teachers were always very impressed. Soon it progressed to people making me offers. The school's police officer even had me make him something. I had some artwork displayed at the city's airport, and when I expressed to my dad that I felt like there were no jobs for me on my degree, he said to try something else. I asked what, and he said art, which I thought was a little funny for the starving artist stereotype. In that moment, it felt like he equated my artistic skills to his intelligence and success. I'm really glad to hear you came full circle and found something to be proud of. I hope you recognize that it is a mark of your intelligence that you had this epiphany. You're not the art kid, while your brother is a smart kid, but instead you're a smart kid who struggled in academics and found success in art, while your brother succeeded in academics and never really pursued art. Maybe for some it won't be a situation like the Einstein quote, but I felt like a fish trying to climb a tree. A few months ago I got the chance for an interview for an okay job. I finished all tests with almost 100% and finished the first 2 interviews quite good, and when I got to the last one they started asking me questions that had nothing to do with my profession. I was completely silent because it has nothing to do with what I studied. I think that I even looked like a fish gasping for water. After they started to make fun of me, I just walked out. Dodge a bullet there. Edit. After rereading my comment, I judged that it came off as r/I am very smart material. A bit sorry. Judged my friend for having very naive and dumb knowledge/beliefs about stuff like economics, politics, geography, history, language, culture, etc. But she was extremely social and extroverted, while I was this somewhat grumpy guy and sucked at making connections with people. Still do nowadays. She works at a high position in the marketing department at a very major global tech corporation's office in our country and Europe. I'm a sysadmin and a half programmer. I ended up studying Pol C and taking some computer science classes. I won't say my education is bad or that it's a useless degree, just that being able to make friends and influence people is much more important than having a lot of knowledge. It's important to have skills, but it's more important to have the skill to show off your skills to the world. I'm learning this the hard way on my 20s. Had an English teacher that said any stories I wrote were bad. I thought that he'd done a good job on it, so I showed it to a different English teacher who said it was brilliant, but I needed to spell check it. Turns out the first teacher basically didn't read it, just saw the spelling errors. Several years later I got diagnosed with dyslexia. This reminds me of the time my class had to write down what we wanted to be. I told my 7th grade science teacher I wanted to be a writer, but I wrote it on an index card. When she saw the index card, she saw my terrible handwriting and immediately looked directly at me and said some of us should reconsider what we want to be. Needless to say, I've been excelling at basically every writing assignment ever I wrote for my high school and college newspaper, and some even got awards. In fact, I got so many writing achievements with these that I still laugh about how she judged my writing's worth on the handwriting instead of the actual content. Not me, but my brother, when he was in elementary school, when grades are based on things other than test scores, the teacher noted on his report card that he needs to work on his skill at cutting with scissors. My brother is left-handed, and the scissors in the classroom were for right-handed people. I was forced to attend art classes and team sports phys ed in school, mandatory until year 11th art or 13, respectively. Those two made sure that my average was ruined. I can't draw or throw a ball, even if my life depended on it. Got the grades to match and be in my most awkward social phase. I got humiliated regularly by well-meaning teachers who couldn't understand that being good at math and physics does not translate into drawing or predicting a ball's movement, forcing me to do it again and again and again while the whole class enjoyed the show. I understand your frustrations, however, I think it's important to work on body coordination, at least until you have a basic proficiency. It comes into play often in life, from slipping on ice in the winter to assembling IKEA furniture in your home. Was contacted by a recruiter and pitched a job opening that fit my description perfectly, as recruiters do. I pushed back and asked to see the exact listing so I could verify. I questioned a bit on the requirements that stated specific programming knowledge and was assured multiple times that while it was on there, it wasn't the primary job function and they don't need a programmer. So, booked the interview, showed up, said hellos, and was thrown at a terminal and asked to write a pile of custom code for something. Had to politely explain that I was assured multiple times by the recruiter that this wasn't a programming position, and was told to just give it a shot anyway, since you're already here, like you're looking for a programmer and you're so hard up that you'd waste your time interviewing someone who's just told you that they don't program at all. One of the interviewers was their lead programmer, and she was extremely petulant toward me for wasting their time. It was quite the experience. I needed a performance art class for my degree. I took drawing. I made many mistakes and etiquette errors. Did you know you're not supposed to talk to the nude models? I didn't. It's also really frowned upon to request specific positions because you find drawing foreshortening quite challenging. Oh, also, I suck at drawing as it turns out the prof wanted to give me a D. We had a chat. I told him I should be graded like I was a psych major with no talent whatsoever who did develop a number of technical improvements over the semester. I got an A. He said I should have taken debate instead because I clearly had a talent for that. Right, because we should only take classes in things we already know we're good at. My art teacher wasn't as rational as yours, so I never went beyond the introductory course. I used to play a lot of poker on my phone, but never with real people. At one point I was up well over $1 million. Edit, not real money. One day I went to a convention and there was a charity poker game. Since a lot of time on the phone, the computer gives you your options and so on, I was excruciatingly awkward and came across as a bumbling idiot who didn't know what he was doing. This wasn't intentional, but it did work in my favor. I won a nice tablet that night. When I do my 2 hours of daily piano practice, I begin with 5 octaves of scales in every key, major and minor. My brother got weary of hearing this day after day and said, if you keep playing those scales, you're going to turn into a fish. You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. Despite the fact that my 12-year-old niece can't read, my sister and I spent years pushing her school district to put her in advanced/gifted classes. They refused because she was getting BS and CS and could hardly read. Last year we got her tested. Turns out she has a crazy high IQ and severe dyslexia, so we took the district to court. Now she's in all advanced/gifted classes with a few accommodations and she's getting straight A's, just like we said arseholes. My son has always been very intelligent, and I thought he was gifted. Then he started school and has been pulling CS, DS, and FS. I finally couldn't take it and took him to get tested. Sure enough, has got high functioning AD and anxiety. I wish I would've tested him sooner, but I thought AD meant hyper and has never really been hyper, so I was convinced he was just lazy. The district are assholes for not believing that a C student should be placed in the advanced classes. I currently work at my local McDonald's M16, and since I live in Quebec, it's a French establishment. French is my third language, but I'm still constantly treated like I'm stupid when I don't completely understand. The worst part is, I'm very eloquent in my first and second language. Bulgarian and English. Public speaking and writing are my passions, but nobody at work thinks I could possibly be intelligent because I'm being judged on my fluency in my third language. Never mind the fact that speaking 3 languages when you're in high school is more than any of them can do. Shit is frustrating. When I was asked to climb a tree, but you're a fox. My husband loved to read as a child despite his mild dyslexia, but in 2nd grade he started to really struggle with school after being held back for a year and being told by a teacher that he was a slow kid. Another teacher took note of the oddity of my husband's change of learning. He suggested to his mom to have his eyes checked. Turns out my hubby is blind as a bat and needed glasses. Sadly, he never recovered his love of reading. So I'm from India and education system in here used to be really bad. We have special exams known as board exams and those scores can help us get into a better college/uni. The issue here is our teachers force us to write the exact same way the answers are given as in the textbook, including the punctuation. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Nothing must be skipped. The teachers who must help the students to actually study and understand the concepts ask us to mug things up. BC all they want is 100% pass percentage and not the proper education. And me on the other hand was terrible at memorizing and remembering stuff if I don't understand the concept in the first place. So I failed some subjects during my monthly tests, and for that I was made to feel like I'm stupid and useless. And the only thing I told to myself was this quote, but I got some decent scores at my final exams thanks to YouTube. Edit. I can't believe that students who are still in high schools are still going through the same shit that I experienced 4 years ago. That's why I wrote used to be. BC I'm not aware of the current scenario, and trust me, the unison colleges are just a little better, not that great either, because people around me carry it on from their school life and do the same route here as well. And people say they're unemployed. I mean, the very reason is right. Here, how can one survive in a field where you must be an expert if you don't know how just memorize the fundamental principles in the first place? I only expressed interest in a few things when I was a kid: cooking, making games. My parents told me they were bad careers and made me play soccer and do scouts and other things I hated. I was terrible academically all the way through the end of college, where I studied management, because these things I was told I was supposed to be doing were of zero interest to me. A few years out I taught myself to code, and now I spend my life making games and cooking for friends, and am fucking great at it. That quote has always rung true for me, but on top of that I really feel this: adults, stop telling kids what they should be interested in. If a kid is interested in something you don't get when they're an adult, it's highly likely that this thing will be a marketplace with hundreds of millions of consumers, and will absolutely be a career. If they were involved early, they'll be golden. Most people have a very backwards looking view of the economy and don't understand how totally it changes with each generation. This saying is too often used as an excuse for not exerting yourself. Of course I didn't do well on the math test, I'm not math minded, that, and you didn't put in enough practice, didn't push yourself outside your comfort zone. But you realistically can't be good at everything. There is bound to be a field/expertise where you will not shine, no matter how hard you try. I believe that's what Op is asking. I'm shit at math, and I blame myself for not putting in the work. I also blame the math teacher I had for the first 8 years in school, not because he was bad, he was just from the old school and didn't really make sure everyone understood. It wasn't only until the last 2 years of school, where I had a teacher who saw how I struggled, and put in an effort to teach it, so I understood, and I'm forever grateful to her for showing me that math class didn't have to suck. When I went to a state university, they opened the freshman orientation with that quote, then said that they want to help build students' curriculum to their needs and what works with them. And then we were given very specific classes that we needed to take, several of which the professor said were weed out classes. They proceeded to judge every fish on its ability to climb. My mother had borderline. She caused a lot of trouble. She constantly judged me for not remaining emotionally sound in incredibly stressful situations, threatening to kill herself/put bars on my window/send me to psyche hospitals, blaming everyone else for fights when she always overreacted and caused them in the first place, saying I ruined Christmas dinner because I knew she would be there and didn't want to show up. She was so scary I couldn't even speak to her. When she pried the lock off my bedroom door and sat down on my bed to talk to me, she always called me a mute and said I had mental problems, save for some obvious residual issues that crop up in anyone who went through this. I have very little problem, emotion-wise or communication-wise, with other people besides her. There's a real stigma against sex writing among a lot of writers, that somehow it doesn't count, or that it's just lazy trash. On a lot of writers forums, you'll see people looking down their nose at the smut writers, with the implication that they only write smut because they lack the talent to write anything more substantial. Weirdly, the people who get most arsy about it tend to be sci-fi/fantasy authors, which are the genres that generally have just about the same low bar to entry and chaff to wheat ratio that erotica and sex writing has. Now, son, I write smut because that's where the money is, and I self-publish because I like being in control of my own stuff. I like to think I'm a pretty solid writer, but being a starving artist sucks. This way, I get people to actually read my stuff. And I get the luxury of, in theory, at least working on my more serious projects, while still earning a living telling stories that people enjoy. Remembering people's names, I'm great at remembering faces and things about people, except for their names. People think I'm inconsiderate, when in fact I just can't remember names half the time. It doesn't help that I can remember massive amounts of dumb trivia and school material, but just not the names of people I meet. I see it all the time in the army, based on fitness test scores, or even perceived fitness test scores. As one of my old military science professors taught my class, the military is the only place in the world where, for some reason, people will act like you're a total idiot, drag on the team, and failure at life, because you did 41 push-ups instead of at least 42. Despite being the exact same person and critical member of the team from a day before. One teacher was intent on holding me back the first year in school, kindergarten/elementary, age 5, because I sucked at arts and crafts. The next year they let me skip a grade cause I already knew how to read and write, which I taught myself a year prior. They just didn't test it at the time and it wasn't part of the curriculum the first year. Me judging another guy I served with, this guy who we all believe was a complete idiot, just everything he said, and it was idiotic. While we were in Thailand, he spent an hour talking to a Thai marine. I will be damned if he didn't learn enough of the language to take a taxi around a city. I firmly believe he would have become fluent if we left him there for a week. When I worked on farms, I was a simple farmhand. No one thought much of me because I was the bottom of the totem pole. And one day a sheep was having trouble giving birth to her babies. No matter which way the vet and my boss turned her or helped her, she couldn't give birth. However, the night before I watched a program on the TV where a woman had the exact same issue during her labor, and they stood her up, and she gave birth easily. So I helped the sheep to get as vertical as possible and the birth just happened in a snap, and it was easy for her. No one questioned me after that, and I was seen as the smartest of the farm hands. Everything in the internet is true. Julius Caesar 1420. When I was in 2nd grade in the 80s, I told the teacher I had a theory that there was a black hole in the center of our galaxy. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Turns out 8-year-old me was right. You were a smart little guy, weren't you? My grade school teacher said my handwriting was so bad I must think I was training to be a doctor. Now I'm one. Threw a fish at a tree. Wait, SpongeBob, we have technology. Went through a 2-year community college by armed program. Had only 3 or 4 different teachers throughout the 2 years, and we had a small class. Had one teacher that told me on multiple occasions that I wasn't a good fit for this program. He had 25+ years working in by armed and at least 10 years of teaching. It really had me second guessing my life. Admittedly, I was horrible at all the homework, but did decent on the hands-on parts of class. The last semester an internship was required. The teacher that didn't like me found internship placements for all my classmates and told me, since I wasn't a good student, that I should try find my own at some sort of basic electronic repair store. Just to spite him, I went into the same hospital that all my other classmates were given internships at and interviewed for an internship. At the end of the internship/semester I was the only one who was offered a position. Suck it. Immortistic. So just take your pick from half of my everyday interactions with people. I'm a chemistry major at university here in the US. I took a few extra years to get started and spread the courses out over about 6 years rather than 4 in 26 now, but fellow students always assume I'm the idiot of the group projects. They're mostly right. They're all better at chemistry, but I'll work on the projects till 2 AM if it means I learn the material and can sleep knowing I did my part. Also, I'm a bartender, and most of these guys act like they've never interacted with people socially, let alone step foot in a bar. I'm hopeful my social skills and work ethic will take me further than my degree. Excuse me, do you know where I can find garlic powder here? Me, I don't work here. Never mind. I'll ask someone that's not stupid. Me, well, okay then. Because I'm a programmer just extremely interested in web development. I'm supposed to be a mathematician genius. I'm not. I failed math 3 years in a row. Yesterday I received my first F for math in my entire high school career. I'm kinda proud of myself. I was told that I was pathetic because I didn't know how to back a trailer with a pickup at 29 years old. I grew up without a father and never had anyone to teach me really much of anything. To this day I've only changed oil in a car once, and that was when I was 16, so I forgot how to do it. The point I had to make to this guy was that nobody knows how to do anything until the first time they do it, and everyone's lives are different. My life played out in a way that I either never had anyone teach me to back a trailer or never had to do it until I was 29. Shit happens. I was this super smart kid who would get 6s and 1 F, always in math. No one thought to test me for a learning disability the entire time. Turns out it wasn't that I wasn't applying myself, but it was dyscalculia. Forgave my parents who were and are very apologetic. Still pretty miffed that I probably went through 20+ math teachers, tutors, and even a tutoring place, and no one thought a thing was weird about that. If your kid is teaching themselves Japanese, can read Middle English without a guide, and learns to fix an air conditioner on their own, but can't divide, there probably is an underlying issue. I have dyslexia, and at age 15 still couldn't tell my left hand from my right. I also had a lot of trouble learning to read and write. I got written off by a lot of teachers. Turns out I'm pretty good at analysis. Even if I struggle with the basics, I ended up with a PhD. That stupid make an L trick. Yeah, just put one hand palm up, and you either make an L twice or not at all. So I was a young lawyer, new to trial work. full of awkwardness and insecurity a couple of times in my first months. I said things so stupid I thought I might get fired. My boss followed me at the elbow to my first trial, and he was nervous for me, giving me advice on dozens of things I hadn't asked about and that I suspected were irrelevant. He kept whispering instructions to me at the trial table, even as I was questioning witnesses, getting me confused about what I should be paying attention to, and even whispered instructions as the judge talked from the bench. And finally the judge, who knew my boss, said to him, "Tommy, you shut up and let the boy learn. He'll do fine." Late in the trial, the judge wasn't going to let me assert one argument I wanted to use, that the plaintiff's choice between differently priced goods should have put him on notice that the goods were of different quality. "That's not a rule of law," said the judge. "No," I said, "it's a rule of thumb. When you buy a car, you know why a Chevy and a Cadillac are priced differently. One is better and nicer than the other." The judge nodded and changed his mind. I could use my argument as I wanted. On the subway back to the office, after I won the trial, my boss mentioned that moment and said it had proven I was a good hire. "If you make people think you're clumsy and in the back of your pocket you have the ability to change a mind that's been made up," he said, "you can do almost anything." That was about 25 years ago, and I haven't looked back. I'm dyslexic, and during secondary school, many of my teachers told my mom that I wouldn't get into college and wouldn't do well in my state exams. I suck at exams, but I still managed to get into college and work my way up. I now have 2 masters and I'm doing really well in my current job, where I'm always thinking of out of the box ideas. Just because you think differently and cannot express myself well in exams or essays doesn't mean that you can't succeed. There is many ways to do that in life. It just took me a long time to not feel stupid due to my teachers. It's called school. I worked as a private groom for a family horse. Previous groom was a world-class groomer and had worked for some of the world's best horse riders. I was constantly being compared to her with everything I did, when they full well knew I was fresh out of college and only an apprenticeship under my belt. I was happy to leave there. I was always bullied for the way I climbed trees. People called me fish boy my whole life. I've believed I was nothing, a mere stain in the existence of humanity. So one day, I set out to prove everyone wrong. I gathered them at the dock of Finch Lake. I was finally going to show them what I was, a human being. I was prepared. I trained for weeks on end, and finally garnered the courage to act, with everyone watching. I got set. This was it. My time is now. So I rammed a fucking boat straight into the dock. Nobody messes with fish boy. My parents used to make me feel bad about being the slowest kid in track and field. I would always struggle even with a 7-minute mile. It wasn't my body that got tired. It was that I felt like I couldn't breathe fast enough. I was always running out of breath and had to stop and catch my breath. 0.15 years later, and I was diagnosed with asthma. Exercise/cold/allergen induced. I took my first puff of albuterol, having not run for months and getting fat, and I was able to run without stopping. Judged my math skills. Well, I went into a coding interview once, and the interviewer asked almost only electrical engineering related question. I felt extremely stupid. When I was 19, I got a job as a pizza delivery driver. I found out I have horrible spatial memory and could never remember the directions to any place I've been before. This was before GPS devices were widespread. My boss really thought I was stupid. He couldn't believe I was going to college and now I have a master's degree. I guess I'll never have that career as a pizza delivery driver. I still get lost going to places I've been before plenty of times and need to use my GPS for pretty much everywhere I go. Deep depression. Example, I know the know-how of electrical trade, but I discovered I'm terrified of being on a high ladder with no anchor point attached. We do this with kids a lot. We expect them to know what we know and forget their blank slates. The workplace. When I was fresh out of college, a lot of the long-time employees at the company I worked for didn't take me seriously, even though I was perfectly capable and had new ideas. Meanwhile, they refused to budge from the old way of doing things, just because it might upset their comfort zone. At some point halfway through my elementary school years, 3rd or 4th grade ish, we got a new principal who decided to switch my school to a super STEM focused curriculum. I'm much more creative and artistic, and my standing in the advanced learning program was predicated on my writing, drawing, and musical capabilities after the switch. I was kicked out of the ALP because I really struggle with mathematics and could barely do division and multiplication, and the new qualifying exam was almost solely algebraic functions, and such it caused a huge blow to my self-esteem and confidence that I still struggle with 2 decades later. I dropped out of high school a little over a year ago, and 95% of my peers, teachers, and administrators of the school openly thought and told me that I wouldn't amount to anything without a diploma. A year later, I'm being taught how to weld one-on-one, and I just recently started a factory job, making $18/hour on a swing shift schedule, which will increase to $21/hours after my 6-month probation period. My end goal is to be a welder with the same company. At work several years ago, I was tasked with designing and releasing 100+ variations of a semi-complex system. The department I worked in rarely got assigned this type of work. The first phase was to make third models of all the variations. Next phase was to release those variations, so the parts would code correctly on a bill of materials for the factory. Because of the number of variations, I found it a lot easier to do both phases at once. 1 week before the first phase was due, nasty emails were flying about my poor performance. I guess the groups that normally do that work are done early. I got all my work done by the first phase deadline and braced myself for the design review. My work was good, and they asked if I could be done with the next phase within 2 months. I told them it was already done and showed them the workroom. Went silent for a few minutes as the people that were trying to get me kicked off the project realized I'd beat everyone else to the finish line despite having 10x the work. Sports. My dad was a freaking legend in his school and a recognizable name in the whole region with his rugby skills, and I came out as a nerd that spends all his day programming code and playing video games / table RPG. The amount of mean looks, insults, and people saying I'm a failure during my youth was a bit too much. When I was younger, I studied for the SAT and didn't do that well, and my brother told me I should just opt out of taking it because the score I'd get would be a joke to colleges. I believed him, opted out, and attended community college. Then I took the SATs during my first year of CC, and I got a 1250/1600. Like and subscribe for good luck, you handsome gentleman.